Today we're going to be doing something a little different and install a mobile radio in the Jeep. I've wanted to install a mobile radio in the Jeep for a long time, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Having a radio off-road is, in my view, absolutely essential. Being able to talk to everyone in your group, being able to communicate if there's any issues while you're out wheeling. And a lot of the places that we go don't have cell service, so if you're meeting up with people, out in the woods, it's kind of nice to be able to communicate via radio if you're not going to have cell service. For years, I've just used handhelds. Handhelds work great, and honestly, you can get some pretty good range out of them if you know what you're doing. But getting the antenna outside the vehicle makes a massive difference in not only how far you can transmit, but how far you can receive from. I have some little handhelds. I can reach repeaters almost 80 miles away from my house, but the second they go inside a car, they can barely transmit a half mile. So moving that antenna outside the vehicle makes a massive difference. And that's kind of the main reason that you want to set up a mobile radio in the vehicle. Other perks is that, it's attached to the battery in the vehicle, so you're never charging anything. Normally it's going to be hard mounted nice somewhere, so beating around off-road, you don't just have a handheld radio in your cup holder. That's going to bounce and fall all over the floor. But the biggest thing here is that you can have more power output and getting that antenna outside the vehicle. So for radio, I picked up this Anysecu. It's a WP9900. I'll leave a link to it. I kind of looked around and I came to this one for a couple of reasons. So first off, the whole radio setup is super small. This is the main body of it. And then all the controls are on the handheld mic portion. And the reason that's nice for this Jeep is when I'm locked in to a harness, or honestly driving this thing on the highway, it's kind of a two-handed driver to keep your eye on. This I can pick up and I can look at a lot closer to see what I'm doing on the radio versus try to lean forward and tune and dial anything on a radio where you adjust it on the actual head unit itself. Second reason I really like this one is it's completely waterproof and dustproof. I do have some half doors for the Jeep, and it's nice to be able to leave those on occasion. And then if it rains or snows or anything like that, I'm not worried about this radio shorting out. And then last thing is this is a fully unlocked radio. So the nice thing is I can program in anything I want to it. I'm only using this for GMRS, but it's capable of a lot more, which is cool. If I ever want to do anything else with it, it's wide open. Now, as far as radio considerations go for off-roading, GMRS is kind of king right now for 4x4, overland, all that stuff. Really the biggest thing is just using what all your friends have, because if you guys have different radios, nothing's going to work together. And I'm not going to go too far in depth in this, but the kind of basic style of radios, you have FRS radios, which are just cheap ones you can buy at like Walmart. You have GMRS radios, which operate on the same frequencies, but just at a higher power. And then you have like ham radios, which definitely that's a little more in depth. Some people use those, not many. But the perk to GMRS is you can get a nice unit that can go in the vehicle, that can have high power output. You can talk over a pretty far distance, but if you have friends that show up with cheap walkie-talkies, you can also talk to them. So that's kind of, I feel like, why it's taken over, the majority. And then also there's CB, which for years was kind of the king for off-roading. But honestly, CBs, they have their perks, but there's a lot of downsides. GMRS is just super easy, and like I said, the biggest perk is they can talk with those cheaper radios you can buy anywhere. So that way everyone in your group can communicate. So for this radio, there's kind of three main components. We have the radio itself, we're going to have an antenna, and then we're going to have the coax that's going to link the two, the wire essentially. So to start off, we do need to drill a hole in the roof, which is kind of the scariest part. On this Jeep, I could care less. I do understand if you have like a newer Tacoma or Jeep, you might be a little stressed out about drilling a hole in the roof, but it's a tiny little 3/8 hole. You can always plug it up later, and it's really not a big deal, but it's by far the easiest way to mount the antenna, and performance-wise, it's going to be one of the best ways to mount the antenna. So let's go ahead, hop up here. I already dropped the headliner down. We just need to drill a quick hole. We can mount what's called our NMO adapter, and we'll go from there. I'll explain some more stuff as we ride through. So I've kind of decided that we're going to drill back on the back of the roof here. I wanted to kind of get it away from the roll cage just because I didn't want that to obstruct signal at all. I went ahead and removed some of the trim. I dropped the headliner just a couple inches, and then I did just slide a tray underneath it just to catch these metal shavings. So let's start off by drilling a small pilot hole. All right, and then We're gonna come back with a 3/8 bit. Most of these NMO mounts use a 3/8 bit. It's kind of the most common. All right, and the hardest part's over with. You look up a mobile radio antenna cable. This is kind of the standard setup you're gonna get. So on this end, this is what's called an NMO adapter. And this is kind of like the most common style for antennas. The cool thing is you can get all different styles of antennas for them. You can swap them out. And essentially, here's like a Midland Ghost antenna. This just threads right on top of there. So this adapter right here, the top threads off. That 3/8 hole that we just drilled, this is going to go through that. This will screw down on the top, and you're done. And this has a gasket on the bottom, so that should seal and be waterproof. And then the antennas also have a seal that's going to be on the outside of this. So there'll be 2 O-rings sealing the roof, so you shouldn't have any leaks or any issues. Then this coax is going to run through the vehicle. We're going to run that all the way to the radio. This is called a PL259 connector, and this is just going to thread directly into the back of the radio, right here on this little covered up port. So super simple. Now the only thing that I'm going to do, I bought this cable a little bit longer, and you don't want to coil this cable up anywhere. So I'm going to end up snipping this and soldering on a new connector at some point. But let's go ahead and install this portion in the roof. We can run the cable and then see how much we need to cut off. So having this going makes it a little bit easier for me, but you can see right up there is our little hole. And we're just going to thread this guy right up in there. Then we're going to take our adapter here and thread that down. Alright, and then if we want, we can just go ahead and install the antenna. So now comes the most labor-intensive part. Pretty much, we're just going to route this coax all the way down the roof line on the inside of the vehicle, just back underneath the trim under the headliner. So not too bad, just a handful of Phillips head screws for my trim to come down. We'll run that along down the A-pillar behind the dash, and then we can start tossing the radio in. So some of the most important things when you're routing the coax, obviously you don't want to kink it or run any hard bends in the line. You don't want to run it against anything abrasive, because bouncing around off-road, you could start to mess up the sheathing on it and have a grounding issue. But lastly, you don't want to run it along any other wires. So other wires can create interference where you get like some static through the radio essentially. So along this whole drip rail, I don't have any other wires ran in the Jeep. So that's a perfect area to run this to not get any interference. I lucked out. I think once I route this around under the carpet, I'm going to have the exact right length. And then I was planning on mounting the radio about right here. So I sat in here and played around with it. I decided I'm just going to mount it on the side of the center console there. It's just super easy. I got a couple little dots marked here, so I'm going to go ahead and drill holes. And I'm just going to screw it straight to the plastic. If it breaks, it breaks. But I have some other things in here mounted to plastic that I think will be totally fine. So I got this thing all buttoned up, and I'm just going to run a couple tests. I've already talked to a couple people and just confirmed everything works. But we're going to check the SWR, primarily because I bought 2 antennas. So I bought a Midland Ghost antenna, which was like $50, $60. And then I bought like another one off Amazon called a Nina, which looks identical. It's technically a dual band, like a ham antenna, which still falls within, UHF, which is what GMRS is. And honestly, everyone can hear me fine on it. So I'm going to test SWR, also power output on this thing, and let's see what it's actually doing. So this is a SWR meter. Essentially, normally the antenna would just plug directly in, but we're putting this in between. And what SWR is it's how much of the frequency is actually getting out through the antenna versus some of the RF electricity is going to bounce back in. So you're looking for like a 1-to-1 to a 1 to 1.5. So right now I have on the cheap antenna. So we just hit the transmit. We're going to go to like a middle frequency. So we're on 19 and 16 is where I was testing. So we're going to hit that guy, let off. So it's at 1.79. That's not, you know, perfect, but it's pretty close to 1.5, so I'd call it acceptable. And that is with this knockoff antenna. Here's the Midland one right next to it. I mean, it's almost the same exact thing. So let's swap these out and see how the Midland one does. Now, regular antennas, like full-length ones, you can actually snip them to adjust the SWR. Obviously, with these Ghost antennas, the coil is wrapped inside, so there's nowhere that we can adjust or tune these. But let's check out how the Midland one does. So the Midland one actually does worse than the $15 one. I think the brand was like a Nina or a Nisa, something like that. So anyways, I'm definitely going to return the Midland one because I'm not going to pay more for a worse antenna. So glad I tested. So also doing these tests, it looks like it's putting out about 20 watts. It said it was rated for 25 watts. A lot of these radios don't actually put out the advertised wattage. And that being said as well, since this is like a dual band radio, it might put out the 25 watts on UHF, just not VHF. And for those interested, UHF is ultra high frequency, VHF is very high frequency. So GMRS operates in like the 462 megahertz range, which is ultra high frequency. So anyways, 20 watt output with a 1.7 SWR is totally fine, especially just for a crawler. I'm not a super radio nerd, although it might sound like it right now in this video, but that is going to be way more powerful and way better communication than what I had with a walkie-talkie or handheld. So super stoked on this, and I'll show you guys kind of how it's mounted in here now. So here in the driver's seat, this is where I got this little guy mounted. This is just a Scosche magnetic mount they use for a phone. Now, traditionally, I had a magnet back on a handheld, and the handheld would hang out right there. And that's just because when I'm fully strapped in the harness, I can reach right here to grab this if I need to talk, as far as, someone spotting me, things of that nature. And another reason I like this new radio, if you guys want to get a handheld, these TID Radio H3s, this is an awesome setup. And the screen layout is pretty similar to the new one here. So honestly, just kind of easy at a quick glance to see everything. But yeah, if you guys are looking for a cheap handheld, something to get into before you kind of do a mobile station, these things are packed full of features. They're super cheap. They get great reception. Definitely need to upgrade the antenna on them. But other than that, this is a really good little option for a handheld. And I'll still definitely keep these in the car because I can hand these out to other people, or, I can hop out of the car and spot other people with the handheld. So super happy how this project turned out. Excited to use it out on the trail. Definitely don't be that guy without a radio. Show up with one, but if you don't have one, hopefully a friend can at least loan you one. I know in this video I kind of ran through a bunch of stuff really quick and threw out a lot of acronyms, things of that nature. If you guys have any questions about handheld radios, or if you have any questions about mobile radios, feel free to drop them in the comments. I will answer any questions that I can. Definitely, it is awesome to be able to communicate with everyone else when you're on the trail and just cruising around town. Like taking a road trip with two cars, talking back and forth is super nice with a radio. If you guys like this video or want to see some more fabrication and 4x4 content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys watching and follow along, and we'll see you in the next one.